from the BBC World Service in association with ABC and All India Radio. This is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell and I'm looking out over the famous Headingley cricket ground in Leeds in the north of England. I'm here for the men's test match between England and India, and it's a ground that backs onto a rugby league pitch, Leeds Rhinos' famous club, although you can't see much of the rugby ground anymore because of this enormous three-tier stand that's been built across from where we are in the media centre. But beyond that, you can see the slanting roofs and rows of small little chimney pots from the red brick Victorian terrace houses that make up the residential streets around the ground. It's been an extraordinary test match so far. We'll talk about that more later in the show.
Jim Maxwell for the ABC in Sydney. Yes, looking forward to another chat about the world of cricket. But unfortunately for those of us in a number of places in Australia, the lockdown continues. We're waiting for the vaccination rate to go up to 70%, 80%, and then we might be free again.
Well, I wish you luck in Australia, Jim, but in India too, in terms of the whole COVID situation, people are still very confused about whether to completely unlock or not or what, so we'll just keep bumbling along. This is Charu Sharma for All India Radio. Glad to be back on Stumped in Bangalore this week, but very soon to depart for Mumbai, where we're going through with our player auctions for the next Pro Kabaddi League, which is set to happen later in the year. You know, cricket has almost gotten back on track, but other sports need to play catch up. And cricket-wise, of course, Jim, you have already mentioned after the highs at Lord's, the low at Leeds.
And I'll tell you what also, with the curtain falling on the first year of the new 100-ball competition here in the UK, we've said goodbye to the white card, the pitch-side DJ booths and the brightly coloured snack-related playing kits as well. We've had a month of fast-paced and big-hitting cricket, and it all culminated in a finale at Lord's in front of almost 25,000 people last weekend. The Oval Invincibles lifted the trophy for the women, and Southern Brave took the big golden H for the men. But was the inaugural 100 a success? Beth Barret-Wild is head of the 100 women's competition at the England and Wales Cricket Board, and she's been telling me how she feels the tournament went.
I'm absolutely buzzing. I'm still flying after that final at Lord's. It's just really surpassed everything that I could have dreamt of. I think that opening game at the Kia Oval on the 21st of July, I think opening with a standalone women's match, it wasn't risk-free. It was a new format, new teams, new spectacle, and launched with the women's competition. It was a big, bold statement to do that, which I think just epitomises what we're trying to do with the 100 in terms of really raise that visibility and profile of women's cricket.
And the competition has only just finished, but are you in a position already to say that the women's pay will be looked at next year? Because, of course, there was a big disparity, albeit the prize money was split equally. I don't think any player and anybody has suggested that the women should be paid the same as the men, but the disparity was very marked in year one.
Yeah, look, I think women's pay is something that I will continually and always will think about and talk about. And I think it's something that's constantly under review. I don't think it actually took the unprecedented success that we've had for us to want to look at that. So, very much being reviewed. I think we've always said that where we were this year is a start point and not an end point. I'm very keen to make sure that we close that gap as quickly as possible. So I think the fact that the women's competition has been such a huge success and is very much a part of the fabric, which makes the 100 very special, hasn't gone unnoticed. And hopefully we'll have some good news to follow on that very shortly.
And given that some of the players who did feature in it were from India, has anyone from the BCCI been in touch, Beth, to say, well, how did you stage this tournament? Do you get a sense that there is any further move towards a women's IPL, or at least expanding that Challenger tournament, which goes on in India at the moment?
Yeah, I haven't had anything directly, but I am certain that the BCI is probably looking at what's been achieved through the 100 and also through the WBBL down in Australia. And I'm sure they'll be looking to have their own sort of premier domestic women's competition, hopefully not before too long. And I think the more of these premier domestic women's comps that we can have, the better for women's cricket generally, just in terms of standard profile. So I'm hopeful that they've taken notice. They've seen how their players in particular have got on. There's been some amazing performances by their players throughout the competition. So fingers crossed it could be a bit of a fire starter for them.
So that's Beth Barret-Wild, head of the Women's 100 from the ECB. And there doesn't seem to be any disputing that certainly from the women's perspective, the tournament has felt like something of a game changer, and more than 17,000 in to watch the women's final. But Charu, the IPL is the biggest domestic cricket tournament in the world. Is there anything that the BCCI might want to take from the 100 and the way that has staged, or do they have it down pat?
The IPL seems to figure everything out. It is the big daddy in terms of such leagues. And I wonder if when will they start considering the 100 as a competitor? Maybe not yet, because the IPL is massive. The 100 needs to get much bigger. But for the women, interestingly, I do think that the 100 has done a great deal. It's just that, and we've been discussing this on Stumped for so many, almost years now, maybe it's still a little premature, because in India, we need a much more robust women's cricket scenario, many more domestic tournaments, much greater depth before we can talk about an IPL-like scenario for women. And I mean no disrespect to women, of course, you know that.
And it was fabulous that there were Indian players in the women's competition, and Jemima Rodrigues absolutely made an enormous impact, leading run scorer across the tournaments. But will the BCCI permit India's men to feature?
Well, for starters, I feel like saying our Jemima Rodrigues, because we featured her on Stumped.
We have featured her on Stumped.
Yes, well done indeed, Jemima. The BCCI are loath to send any of the Indian cricketers out for any such league anywhere in the world, and I think that attitude, sadly, will continue. The only way we can break that system is if Indian cricketers who play at various levels quote-unquote, retire from Indian cricket and then seek a no-objection certificate from the Indian Cricket Board, not easy to get, mind you, and then try their luck in these leagues. So it's going to take a big shift in mindset to try and sort of ply your trade as a male Indian cricketing professional.
Well, the opening day of the third test between England and India's men could not have been more remarkable. India, having turned the tables on England at Lords and romping to an astonishing victory on the final day, were bowled out on the first day of this match for just 78. Well, India were 1-0 up with 3 to play coming into this third test, and whoever wins the series will hold aloft the Pataudi Trophy. We thought we'd delve into the name behind the trophy a little bit here on Stumped. England are the current holders after winning the series on home soil here in 2018. Pataudi is one of the biggest names in the history of Indian cricket. The trophy was inaugurated in 2007 to mark the 75th anniversary of India's first ever test, and named after Iftikhar Ali Khan, the Nawab of Pataudi, who played for both India and England in a 14-year career. His son Mansour competed at the very top of the sport, despite playing much of his career with impaired vision in his right eye. Charu, tell us more about the Pataudi family, and in particular Mansour Ali Khan Pataudi, the player known as Tiger.
Well, not a terrific time to be talking about Pataudi, considering what's going on at Leeds. But yeah, I mean, Tiger was quite the man, quite the cricketer, quite the legend. Can't argue with his cricketing pedigree, his class, his style, his panache, and just the way he infused a much higher level of confidence in Indian cricketers at that time. Any contemporary of his will, of course, quickly rise to talk about just how important Pataudi was in the history of Indian cricket. He straddled the world as not only a prince in India, but as an Oxford Blue. So there was, that level of exposure that a lot of other Indian cricketers at that point did not have. So Pataudi seemed to be the skipper that took India into the modern era of cricket. I was happy enough to get to know him a shade, but I do know somebody who has now thankfully joined us in the program, who spent quite a bit of time with the legend Tiger, his nephew, Saad bin Jung. Saad, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Charu. Absolute pleasure joining you. And yes, Tiger Pataudi has been on my back, and he's been sitting on my back ever since the moment I held my bat. I've always been Tiger's nephew till I got to London, and I played a few matches there. And then there I was Pataudi's grandson. But in India, I remained Tiger's nephew, and I loved it. I mean, it was huge pressure coming on us. But then, we had this joke, and I kept telling them that both father and son couldn't do what I did, get a 100 against West Indies, international 100 at the age of 18. He didn't like that. So he understood me, and in the end, we were just like father and son. He was a wonderful man.
When did you, while you were growing up, suddenly realize, oh my gosh, this is a huge legacy?
When we were playing, and my elder brother, he too played cricket, people expected us to play, bat like him, run like him, feel like him. And for me, when I started playing very young. I started playing when I was maybe 3 or 4 years old with my uncle, literally with the entire Indian team. And if there was another team that was coming in from, say, the West Indies or the English, they would come to our house and we'd play till 3 a.m, 7-year-old kid. And that's the cricket I grew up with. And that's the cricket I was told to love and enjoy. As I kept growing, and I kept understanding what cricket in India was all about, and I came into the international circuit and the first class circuit, I realized that the game over here had changed. I mean, the Pataudis were gone. The romance that they got to the cricket was gone. The practical approach that they got was gone. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why they named the trophy after the father and son, because of the immense. They grew up in England, and they learned their cricket in England on seaming wickets. So when they came to India, they too took a hit because they didn't understand the sort of limitations that Indian cricketers had. And to a certain extent, I think my uncle judged me with that also. He wanted me to be that cricketer who'd be great in Britain, but I wasn't. I was an Indian cricketer who learned my cricket here. And wherever there was a question of understanding cricket, there was only one man that I would go to, because Tiger Pataudi had this immense ability to put everything into one line. And I can give you an example. Like I was getting out caught at a point of a square cut, and I spoke to half the world, and they gave me these incredibly detailed technical answers. And then I spoke to Mahmujan once, and the only thing he said was square cut to covers. Now, you had to understand the man, and you had to understand what that man gave to cricket. And I tried to absorb that in my game. Wasn't too successful. My cricketing acumen and my cricketing brain wasn't like the Pataudis. I mean, if you looked at us in the 70s, it was all about technique. It was all about elbow out. It was all that kind of a thing. But when you spoke to Tiger Pataudi, all he would say is do what works. I found it very difficult to change with the ease with which they could change, and which is one of the problems that we're having in England today, that our boys are just not able to adapt to the changing conditions. And as professionals, I think they're quite a sad sight for me to see.
Well, there's no question that Tiger was perhaps well ahead of his time. But, tell us about the fact that he lost his sight in one eye. And still, it was quite incredible how he went on to become such a key player for India despite that handicap.
Well, if you it was 1960 and I was 3 months old. And when my mother heard that her younger brother had an accident, they didn't realize how bad it was till she got to England. She left me with my aunt, and she got to England, and she stayed with him for 6 months. And they were coming back from a match practice. They were talking to each other, and the person hit something in front at about 5 or 6 kilometers an hour. And a piece of glass just flew into his eye. But to come back and say, no, I'm going to play with one eye. I'm going to change my game, understand what my limitations are. And then to come and conquer his own fears, I think was just one of the most incredible things. Charu, I also understand this to a large extent, because when I was 19, I was told I had 3 months to live. And one of the reasons why I gave up the game was, it just changed my life. And I was in hospital for 2.5 years. When I came out of that, did I want to go out and conquer the world of sport with my limitations and inhibitions and fears? I chose not to. I chose to go into wildlife and conservation. But Tiger Pataudi, the sheer strength of the man took him into Test cricket, not just Test cricket, took him into actually defining the term cricket for Indians. His approach, his positivity, his intent, his aggressiveness, his telling his teammates that we're Indians now, we're not playing for a state side. His ability to convince the team that they could beat an English side or a West Indian side. That was amazing. After that really devastating crash that he had, to come back. And I think it formed his character, like that. Maybe had Tiger Pataudi not had the accident, he might not have been the great cricketer that he is now.
Yeah, hi, Saad. It's great to have you with us. I would love to learn more about what kind of character your uncle was away from the cricket field. You've alluded to it a little bit. Tell us a bit more about him as the person.
That's a very tricky one. I know superstars, and the two things about superstars are, one, they're fantastic in the sport. They're great, and that's why they're superstars. But when they come home, are they still superstars? And what happens when they're humans? Does it diminish their whole aura, or they become lesser people? That's a very tough one, and that's a very private one, because if you look at the two Pataudis, and I'd like to bring my grandfather into this, who of course played his test for you in the Buddy line, and he walked out of that series. You know why? Because I think he was a royal pre-1947, and he had the confidence within the system and himself to actually turn around to the British Crown and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to play for you. I don't believe in the spirit of that you're desecrating the spirit of cricket. I'm going to walk out. Could Tiger Pataudi do that post-1947, when the princes were no longer princes and the royals were no longer royals? And there was huge complex within the fraternity of royalty itself? I don't think so. Suddenly, Tiger Pataudi found that he was nothing. And the only place that he was actually accepted, both as royalty and as a fantastic genius of a cricketer, was England. And therefore, he preferred staying in England more than he preferred staying in India. So there was a lot happening in his life, and I actually don't envy him. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, because those were really very tough times for him.
So it's Jim Maxwell in Sydney. I can remember watching him play in the 60s, drop kicking Dave Renneberg over the square leg fence at the MCG. He had an extraordinary stance, of course, because of the loss of eyesight in his right eye, but he was a very effective and skillful player. Just talk a bit more about his legacy, because we're now seeing an Indian team that looks the opposition in the eye a lot more than most of the players under the Nawab Pataudi did when he was captain.
I mean, if you just put it down into a one-liner, it would be play your cricket off the back foot. Learn to play cricket off the back foot. He played extremely late, and at the very last second, he was explosive. So the amount of power that he generated at the very last second was something that I haven't seen in any cricketer. So Tiger Pataudi, the legacy that he got to us, apart from the lofted shot, the way he fielded, the fact that, there was this whole thing about white man versus colored man and how one had to look up to white man. Well, Tiger Pataudi actually put that down in the dressing room and said, no, we're all equal. I've lived with them. I've worked with them. I know them. I've played with them. We're all equal and we will take them on. So there was a lot of change in the psyche of Indian cricket that he put forth. And I think that gave us the ability or to even think that we could win. And we did. And we landed up becoming world beaters much later. And I think that was basically because of the foundation that Tiger Pataudi actually structured for us.
Well, great to hear from Saad bin Jung, nephew of Tiger Pataudi. Well, hopefully that has helped everybody to have a little bit of a better idea of what the Pataudi name means when you see Joe Root or Virat Kohli lifting the trophy at the end of the series, the trophy named after the Nawab of Pataudi, Iftikhar Ali Khan, the father of Mansour Ali Khan. Well, that's it this week for our Stumped programme on All India Radio. My thanks to Charu, Sharma, Jim Maxwell and to you all for listening. And don't forget, you can keep in touch with the show throughout the week. We're at BBCWS Sport and use the hashtag BBC Stumped. In the meantime, do stay safe and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Stumped is a BBC sport production for the BBC World Service in association with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and All India Radio.